Hi you guys, happy September. I truly cannot believe that we're here, but we are slowly but surely diving into my favorite time of year. You guys know I thrive during the fall and winter. I have my fall lipstick on today, one of my favorite Maybelline lip colors. I'll link it down below. I literally break it out every single fall. I'm in a black sweatshirt from Lululemon. I've got my chunky gold jewelry on. It's actually quite chilly outside today here in New York. It's just a good day. And today we're gonna be talking about one of my favorite things, books. We're going to be breaking down and diving into everything that I read during the month of August. If you guys didn't know, if you're new to my channel, first of all, hi! My name is Ruby. I live in New York City. This is my lifestyle channel. Please be sure to go ahead and subscribe if you haven't already. We're trying to reach 7K. That is the next goal here for this channel. I am a big reader. I love books. I love my Kindle life. And so this is a series that I started this year where every single month we go through the books that I read. I give a quick synopsis, I give my review, and then I give a little rating as well. Unfortunately, August wasn't a super big reading month for me. I was a little bit busier than anticipated. However, I still definitely found some really great books and also a book that I have quite a few thoughts on. I feel like September is probably going to be a little bit bigger. I also got off the waiting list for some books that I've been dying to read from the virtual library app that I use. Plus, with it finally transitioning into fall, I feel like I'm just in an even more reader mood because it's such a cozy activity. But without further ado, let's just jump into today's video and yeah, let's break down everything that I read during the month of August. Okay, so the first book that I read was The X Talk, which is written by Rachel Lynn Solomon. So let's read the synopsis first. As always, I'm just pulling these from Amazon. Shay Goldstein has been a producer at her Seattle public radio station for nearly a decade, and she can't imagine working anywhere else. But lately, it's been a constant clash between her and her newest colleague, Dominic, who's fresh off a journalism master's program and convinced he knows everything about public radio. When the struggling station needs a new concept, Shay proposes a show that her boss greenlights with excitement. On The X Talk, two exes will deliver relationship advice live on air. Their boss decides that Shay and Dominic are the perfect co-hosts given how much they already despise each other. Neither loves the idea of lying to listeners, but it's this or unemployment. Their audience gets invested fast, and it's not long before The X Talk becomes a must-listen in Seattle and climbs the podcast charts. As the show gets bigger, so does their deception, especially when Shay and Dominic start to fall for each other. In an industry that values truth, getting caught could mean the end of more than just their careers. This is one of those books that I've heard like a couple people talk about, but I feel like it's still kind of gaining popularity in the book talk realm. I could be wrong, but I feel like I haven't heard this one talked about as much as like other popular fiction novels. However, I really enjoyed this book. I would say for one, like it has to do with podcasting, and that's something that I love listening to. It's also something that I used to do. I used to have a podcast. I still have a podcast. It's up and running. Like you can listen to the previous episodes, but I haven't posted on there in about a year. However, kind of switching subjects for a second, that's actually something that I am kind of going back to and thinking about how I can bring the podcast back in the new year. So I've been doing some brainstorming and kind of some like vision boarding and mapping out, but that's besides the point. I guess basically though, it does have to do with the career field that I'm pretty like familiar with. This was a quick, easy, really enjoyable read. I loved both the characters of Shay and Dominic. I loved their growth throughout the book. I loved, spoiler alert, but their relationship as they, you know, started being friends and then more than friends. I really did think that they were quite a cute couple, and as like kind of dramatic as their like reunion was in the end, to me it was like the perfect storybook ending. Sometimes you just need those reads where everything is wrapped up in a perfect little bow and there might be conflict like during the primary like middle part of the story, but by the end everybody's like come back together and the couple lives happily ever after. And honestly, even though like the primary purpose of this book I don't think was to be like just about the romance, I really enjoyed the way that the romance parts were written. I feel like in terms of just kind of being realistic, even though I just talked about it being kind of a storybook ending, but like the romance scenes between the two, I just feel like they were written really realistically. It didn't feel like a fantasy, if that makes sense. It definitely was one of like the best kind of like book talk romances. It definitely read like a modern day romance. Like there was enough tender moments, but there were also moments that were spicy and were like sizzling. I didn't feel like it dragged on at all. I felt like it was a super entertaining read. Is it like a life-changing book? No, but is it one that I like immensely enjoyed and I also would like them to turn it into either a movie or a miniseries? Yes. I also really liked the relationship between Shay and her mom, and also how they touched on grief and the loss of a parent and how they kind of intertwined that into the story, and also her career as a podcast host. I just felt like, again, that was a very real part of the book that so many people have dealt with, a premature loss of a parent. And I feel like they handled it really well. And again, it was just written from a very honest perspective. I'm gonna give this book a 5 out of 5. To me, it like ticked all the boxes. I finished it feeling very satisfied, like nothing was really missing from it. The pace was great. It was a bit of a longer book, but I finished in like a day and a half. So that was my first read for the month of August. Then I took like a week and a half break, didn't read anything. And then the next book that I read was Every Summer After by Carly Fortune. So let's go ahead and read the synopsis. They say you can never go home again, and for Persephone Fraser, ever since she made the biggest mistake of her life a decade ago, that has felt too true. Instead of glittering summers on the lakeshore of her childhood, she spends them in a stylish apartment in the city, going out with friends and keeping everyone a safe distance from her heart, until she receives the call that sends her racing back to Barry's Bay and into the orbit of Sam Florrick, the man she never thought she'd have to live without. For 6 summers, through hazy afternoons on the water and warm summer nights working in his family's restaurant and curling up together with books, medical textbooks for him and work-in-progress horror short stories for her, Percy and Sam have been inseparable. Eventually, that friendship turned into something breathtakingly more before it fell spectacularly apart. When Percy returns to the lake for Sam's mother's funeral, their connection is as undeniable as it has always been. But until Percy can confront the decisions she'd made and the years she spent punishing herself for them, they'll never know whether their love might be bigger than the biggest mistakes of their past. Told over the course of 6 years in one weekend, Every Summer After is a big, sweeping, nostalgic story of love and the people and the choices that mark us forever. I would give this book so many more stars than 5 if I could, but for the sake of just sticking to the rules, we're gonna give this 5 stars. I would say, you guys know, one of like my favorite 5-star books that I've ever read is Before We Were Strangers by Renee Carlino, and I would almost put this book up there with that. This is a love story, but more than that, there's almost like a grandness and a greatness to it. It feels like one of those epic, grand, big love stories. It's also one of the perfect summer reads, and obviously I read this in August, so it was very timely, because it takes place in this cute little beach town, so it's just very on theme. As the synopsis said, it tells a story from 6 different summers and then the weekend when the main 2 characters reunite. So you're learning how Percy and Sam first came together, how they fell apart, and all the while, every other chapter kind of going like back and forth between a previous summer and the current weekend. I love the fact that this book just really goes all in on the fact that sometimes your first love is your love and your greatest love. I can definitely relate to that, considering the fact that, you know, my boyfriend Kevin, we've been together for almost 5 years now, and he was my first major relationship. And I just knew that he was absolutely my first love, and I knew that he was the person that I wanted to spend forever with and spend the rest of my life with. And some people kind of thought that that was not crazy per se, but that, you know, I might change my mind, you know, I'm young, but I just knew, and so I really leaned into it, and that's exactly what this book does as well. Those who are meant to eventually come back together and find each other absolutely will, and that is something that I definitely believe. Now, I will say, but this wasn't like upsetting to me. I definitely predicted the reason that Percy and Sam like didn't make it at first, and like had some major conflict. I have other friends who read the book and said that they didn't see it coming. I definitely was able to guess it pretty early on in the book, but again, it didn't make it any less satisfying, and I wasn't necessarily like upset or let down. I feel like every single character is really well developed. Even those who don't necessarily have a lot of like page time and aren't like major players in the book, I just feel like each of them were really given their due and just really well developed, well thought out. This would definitely make an incredible movie. I'm surprised somebody like hasn't gotten their hands on this yet. And somebody told me, this could be wrong, but that this was Carly's debut novel, and if that's true, this makes it even more incredible. It's an emotional book too. I definitely saw some like TikTok reviews afterwards where people were like bawling their eyes out reading this. I definitely cried more reading Before We Were Strangers, but this one definitely still like totally gave me the feels. Yeah, 5 out of 5, like 150% for me. I feel like this book gained popularity super quick, so if you've read this, definitely let me know your thoughts down below. Were you rooting for Percy and Sam to get back together? Were you kind of hoping that like after this epic weekend they would still like go their separate ways? Like, let me know. I, for one, was definitely rooting for them, if you can't tell. Okay, so we are ending not only this video, but the month of August with my final book, which was Ugly Love by Colleen Hoover. I feel like I've read at least one Colleen Hoover book every single month since starting this series. But for the most part, I really do enjoy her books, and they're extremely popular, and so I've been trying to just kind of like read through like her canon this year. When Tate Collins meets airline pilot Miles Archer, she doesn't think it's love at first sight. They wouldn't even go as far as to consider themselves friends. The only thing Tate and Miles have in common is an undeniable mutual attraction. Once their desires are out in the open, they realize that they have the perfect setup. He doesn't want love, she doesn't have time for love, so that just leaves the sex. Their arrangement could be surprisingly seamless as long as Tate can stick to the only 2 rules that Miles has set for her. 1, never ask about the past. 2, don't expect a future. They think they can handle it, but realize almost immediately they can't handle it at all. Hearts get infiltrated, promises get broken, rules get shattered, and love gets ugly. So this is kind of one of those like no strings attached moments, and I knew that that was kind of like the general premise of the book going into it, because all of the reviews and recommendations that I had seen about this book did touch on that. But I am going to be honest, I really did not enjoy this book, and I was honestly just reading it waiting to be done with it. I wanted to finish it because I wanted to be able to say that I've gone through like the entire Colleen Hoover canon, or at least most of it. I probably won't read like some of her really early like smaller books and like collaborations, but like her most popular ones, I wanted to read through all of them. And the way that people were raving about this book, I didn't expect to dislike it as much as I did. I was fine with maybe leaving feeling kind of neutral, but I just really didn't like this book. And I'm gonna explain why, because just simply saying I didn't like this book is not like, you know, not a necessary or satisfying review. I'm really hoping that I don't get demonetized, because I'm about to dive into like some kind of more mature topics. But let me just say this, I have no problem with steamy romance novels. I have definitely read my fair share. I feel like a lot of Colleen Hoover's books get pretty steamy, but that's not the entire point of the book. And so if I'm going to read a novel where it is more of a steamy romance, I still want it to have substance, and I want to be rooting for somebody. I feel like honestly this book was just all about the sexual moments, to the point that it made me bored when I was reading it. And not only that, but every single one of those moments kind of just felt and read the same. I felt like every time I was reading one of their encounters, it was written extremely similarly to the previous one. And I'm sorry, I never like to feel like I'm bashing on a book, but one, I do think it's helpful to like get multiple perspectives and opinions, and also it just wouldn't be truthful if like I didn't, you know, give you guys my honest opinion. And that's the great thing about like art and reading and literature, it's all subjective, right? So somebody could love something and the other person like could really dislike it, but that's the beauty of us all being able to have our own opinions. So secondly, let me just say, I was not rooting for this couple at all. I'm saying Tate because she was the main character in the book, but any woman deserves so much more than an unavailable person. And Miles from the get-go was explaining that he was an emotionally unavailable person. He was being extremely honest, and Tate went into it kind of feeling like, oh, maybe I can fix him, which is a terrible way to enter any relationship. There was such little growth in Miles that by the end of the book, when he said like, I'm ready for a relationship, I want to dive in, I was like, no, you're not. And I just felt like Tate was settling, and it was just really frustrating to read. I just by the end of the book, I still felt like they were so wrong for each other, and I wasn't rooting for them. Again, there are kind of some spoilers when talking about this, but I can't help it because I wouldn't be able to like dive into a review if I didn't. I feel like Miles still hadn't healed from his previous relationship. He made it very clear that he was always going to love his ex more than any other woman. They were both just kind of like settling for the short end of the stick. Sorry guys, my camera battery died, so I had to switch it out. The camera angle like changed it all, that's why. This is honestly like the first Colleen Hoover book. You know, there have been a couple of her books that I haven't like loved, but I've liked them. This is the first one that I definitely just did not like, and I wouldn't recommend it. There was definitely still like plot to this book. It just wasn't a great one, and it wasn't very impactful or effective in my opinion. I felt like for this one, the pacing was definitely off, and it did feel slow and repetitive in some parts. And so honestly, just for all of those reasons, I'm gonna have to give this book like a 1.5 star out of 5. I don't want to give it a 0 because like it wasn't that bad. I just, like I said, I wouldn't want to read it again. I wouldn't recommend it. I would say that you can skip this Colleen Hoover novel. But in no way am I saying that this has like deterred me from reading more of her books, because like I said, for the most part, I've really loved or strongly liked everything else, and there are still quite a few left on the roster that I'm really excited to get through. I just definitely did not enjoy this one. And again, I'm really interested if you guys have read Ugly Love, like you need to comment down below and let me know, like, am I crazy? Because reading like the reviews on Amazon and Goodreads, I feel like I'm the only person on this side of the aisle. So definitely let me know your thoughts. I would love to like have a dialogue and just hear from you guys. But that wraps up all of the books that I read during the month of August. I really hope that you guys did enjoy this video, even though like I said, we didn't have a ton of books to get through. However, if you did enjoy this book and you're excited for the next month's installment, be sure to give this video a big thumbs up, and again, click that subscribe button down below. We're trying to reach 7K. That is next goal here for this channel. Follow me on all of my other social media networks, Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, Clubhouse. Check out my Amazon shop. I have a like to know it page, and then also in the description box, I have like tons of discount codes to some of my favorite brands. I love you guys so much. I hope that you all are staying safe, happy, and healthy, and I will talk to you guys again very, very soon in my next video. Okay? Bye, everybody.